Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to What's the Point? And I'd especially like to welcome our first-time listeners, and there's probably a few given who my guest is, people that are very interested to hear about him. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Peter Strople. Hello, Peter, and thank you for joining me.
Hey, Bill. Good morning. Great to meet you. Great to see you again for a long time. So, yeah.
It has been a long time. It's always good to see that smile you've got. So if I were to read everything that kind of starts to define or clarify who Peter Strople is, we wouldn't have time for much of a conversation. So I'm going to do my best to kind of just top line the generalities, because I want to touch on a whole lot of things with you today, Peter. There is such diversity in your life and in what you do and the lives that you touch. I want to get through all of that if we can. So Peter is the founder and chief executive officer at Friends of Peter, and also at 02 Holdings and Strople Ventures, LLC. In general, Peter is a very accomplished businessman for many, many years. And currently he's involved in several different venture capital partner type companies that we'll talk about a little bit. And that's one side. Another aspect of Peter is, and I definitely want to talk about this, is as a business strategist and your concept of instant change. If you're going to have a meeting, walk out of the meeting with something changed, something significant and moving forward, it's a fabulous concept. I want to share that with everybody. Peter's often been called the most connected man in America. That again opens up a whole lot of conversation and helps to explain why I'm welcoming some new listeners today. And then it gets into some areas that really touch my heart. And this is part of Peter and his beautiful wife, Kelly, that just really make me proud to know him and happy to have him as a guest. I can't touch on all of them, but he's chairman emeritus at the Refuge House Foster Care Agency in Dallas. He's been involved in just any number of not-for-profit organizations that help people. He's the chairman of the Texas Fund Raising for Keros Prison Ministries. He's got a strong passion for seeing ex-offenders reintegrated into communities and basically to finalize their rehabilitation. And like I said, it goes on. And as if that's not enough, working with his wife, Kelly's primary focus is in the area of agriculture, where she's working to help develop and mentor, along with Peter, the next generation of leaders. But in particular, she's very passionate about making sure that family farms survive generationally. That's the overview. That's the recap. I'm tired of just from saying that, Peter. How do you keep going? Where do you get the energy, my friend?
Just every morning, the chance to help somebody and help a friend that's doing something amazing. So, that's the basis. You know that I'm on this call because of you and what you represent, and whatever I can do to help you make a difference in this world. That's what our basis. Yeah.
Well, that's really good. And so here's where I'm going to start, because it's something that I feel is so important and helps to define who you are. And it's something that I think a lot of people would have questions on. And that is the whole concept of founder and chief executive officer at Friends of Peter. Explain that to us.
Well, Friends of Peter was I wouldn't say it's kind of a dream, but I was sitting with some friends of mine back in the 80s and in the 90s, and we're just talking about life. And one of the guys was a former CEO of Walmart. The other guy was the guy that created Sam's Club. Another guy was a former governor of Alaska. And these are just significant guys. And as we were sitting here talking, every time we got together, the first thing we say, we talk a little bit about the things we're involved in, but then we'd always say, hey, listen, do you know anybody here? Is there anybody here, do you think, that could help me in what we're doing? And it's literally these significant guys saying, hey, do you know anybody else, that should be part of what we're talking about? And when we're done in the conversation, they were saying, I made the statement about, if you're a friend of ours, there isn't anything you can't do. You've been validated at the highest levels. And the fact you're calling yourself a friend. And I saw this because when I started the Friends of Peter idea, I started with a instant change mornings is what I called it. And I did it in Austin because I wanted to go back to the group that I knew the best. And I figured they're the ones that are going to be the toughest on me. And I had over 60 people in the room, and each of them paid $500 to be there, which is pretty amazing. And the whole conversation was, I just wanted people to share, what are they doing? What are they doing to make a difference? Is there anything we can do to help? And then what I wanted to do is using our group is to validate and invalidate assumptions around that strategy, and then come up with an idea that says, hey, if we do this, it can change who you are this afternoon. And what I saw when we had one of the breaks, I saw a guy that was almost homeless. This guy had lost his job, but he was still a friend of ours. And people were asking, why is that guy there? And I said, because he was actually sponsored to be there because he's our friend. And what I saw was during the break is Bill Fields, the former CEO of Walmart, walked over and said hi to him. And he actually gave him a hug. And then they started to talk. And then I saw Bill hand him a card, gave him a hug again, and then we went back to the session. As they were leaving, I saw the whole room change in regards to that quality of that person. People started to walk up to him, say hi. People were asking him. I found out later, how do you know Bill? Are you friends? I mean, it was crazy, the value of what he just changed in a moment because of that hug and because he was seen as somebody significant. And Bill actually said to him, listen, if you want a job at Walmart, just give me a call. Let's get you into Walmart, right? But he was just whatever you could do to help somebody when they're in trouble. And I just love that. I love the idea that when one of my favorite things is when I'd say this to you, Bill, if I hugged you in public, or if you sat with me in public, I say, hey, thanks for seeing me in public, because I want people to know that you're my friend. And I want people to see me when I hug somebody. And when I shake somebody's hand, I want them to know the significance of the people I'm around. And I usually find out that people come over and say hi anyway. I'm going to say, by the way, I'm sitting with Bill. Do you know who Bill is? And I'll always share who you are to me, probably bigger. I'll probably make you look more significant than you think you are. But I love that. And that's what I do. I just want people to know that these are people. I don't hang out with idiots. These are my friends. And what we can do to help. And we're having conversations of things that are going to change the world. So.
Well, it's a very impressive organization, and I know so your primary residence is Austin. You also have a place outside of Denver, which is where you are now, as if you don't know, but that's for the listeners. So there are a couple of Friends of Peter chapters, and they meet on Saturday mornings in person. And I think that's what makes it so special, because it is an in-person thing. And to know Peter is to know that relationships matter. And when he says that he helps to drive this group because he wants to help other people with people that want to help people, that's exactly what he does. And I'm just going to say this one thing. If you're looking at YouTube, I'm holding up a pen. And Peter, I think you got one of these. A friend of mine heard us talk several years ago, and he sent me this pen that's engraved with TFBIML. And it's one of Peter's standard sayings, thanks for being in my life. That brings me to a question. I'm going to come back to Friends of Peter, but right now what I want to do is ask you how you reconcile, how it does reconcile the relationship-driven, how can I help other people attitude, and so much involvement in the venture capital world, because venture capitalists typically are driven by the financial rewards and financial rewards only. Tell us how that reconciles and how that goes together.
Just, most, Bill, you're in the same position. People call you all the time. And there's somebody I want you to meet. There's a group that I met. They're looking for capital. everything's based on money. Everybody wants to know how much money you can write a check for, and they're looking. And what I saw is that because every relationship is based on what you can do to help somebody today, it has to turn into capital. At some way, you're creating something that has to sustain somebody's life, right? And obviously, in this case, it's a business life. When I was introduced to people who've been screwed, right? And I use that word very, very real in regards to money, where people offered them money, they claimed that they were going to give them money, and nothing was happening. And I realized that most people are in life for themselves. So even people that claim to be money guys, they're really in it for themselves in regards to what they can see in having get a return, right? And so we're really playing games with people in people's lives, right? And when you sit around with organizations and listen to stories of people who've taken their lives, where all of a sudden it looks like they're on top of the game, but then all of a sudden something comes along, and the next thing you know, they're taking their own lives. You realize that there's something happening, and what I started to see is that I just wanted to be real, right? And for me, the most important conversation we could ever have is in regards to what is the quality of what you're creating, and how do we sell that? Who you're going to change? Whose life are you going to change by this being created? And I wanted that conversation to be really important. So most of the conversations that I do, I always start with, hey, look, let me tell you, I want to learn more about why you're doing this, why you're the person that's creating this. And I just want to validate that. And then I use that to validate with my friends in regards to, does that make sense? Is that really going to change something? Who's your dream? Who's your dream customer? Who's your dream acquirer? Who's your dream investor, right? I'll use those names to validate the assumptions around that business. And we do it in a moment, right? And you know that I'll pick up the phone and call somebody, right? And it gets us focused on, hey, look, if this is your dream relationship, this is your dream conversation, you should be giving me the best conversation you could give me. It's not to me, it's to this person I'm introducing you to that you said you wanted to know, right? And I could hear, do they answer the questions? Are they asking all the questions? Do they even understand their business? When the person says, hey, look you sound like somebody else. Is that somebody that's significant? Is that a competitor that you need to be worried about? I can see where they kind of let things down because they just don't really know the whole game in regards to what you ask in regards to these conversations, especially around the investments. So the most important thing for me is I want people that are strategic. I want relationships where you can actually, you like the person you're sitting at the table with. And it's not based on title. It's not based on who their name is, literally connecting with somebody. Mm-hmm. And I always ask that question. If you're sitting on the board of this company, if this person was your son or grandson or granddaughter, are you giving the same advice that you would give them? Mm-hmm. Right. And if you said something today in regards to relationship or asking them to do something strategically, if they did that, would that change the value of this opportunity? Would it change it to the point that I'd want you to be on the advisory team? Would you join their board? Would you be an investor in what you're talking about? And that's exactly what we talk about. Is that ending moment? Is there anything in this that says it's real? Yes, it is real. We validated that. Is this something you'd want to be part of? Yes, I would absolutely be part of that. How would you want to be part of that? I might be an investor. I'd absolutely be part of their advisory team, Peter, right? I'd be a customer, right? Now we can use your name and that to change the value of that conversation in a moment. So this afternoon, when you start talking to people, you can say, this is who I talked to this morning. This is what they said about me. By the way, you can validate that, but look at who I am now. That's what this is based on. So, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to step out here and just make a statement to summarize what my take on that succinctly is. Basically, you work with venture capital companies and involved in different projects where financial success is very important, but it's not the exclusive driving factor in that business. I want to get to your childhood a little bit, but not right now. But I do want to say that for the listeners, Peter's Canadian, eh? And he came to the States some time ago for some business opportunities, which I'm going to ask you to talk about. But I know one thing that you have said in the past, you had a significant realization moving from Canada to the US, surprised at how the US was so transactional based versus
Right.
relational based. Expand on that for us.
Um, Growing up in Canada, we have 30 million people. And so it's not a big market. And what I saw that when you do create a business, you tend to have second and third chances to fail because you don't have a big market to go to, right? So even the people you're dealing with either have to help you get better based on on what you did, or you just can't find the competition. And at the time I was moving to the US, I saw that. And I realized that when I moved to the US, the first thing, and I was an executive, one of our attorneys came up to me and said, "Hey, by the way, Peter, you got to be very careful when we hire women, when we hire people of color, because if anything happens here, they're going to sue us. If they don't do their job and we have to let them go, they're going to sue us." And I'm sitting back and going, first of all, I have sisters, so it doesn't make any sense to me. In Canada, I never looked at Canada being anything other than from people from everywhere. So color doesn't mean anything to me, right? But now you're telling me this matters. And I remember standing at a business school and I was speaking to the students, and I said, my belief when I look at Canada gives you second and third chances to fail. You don't have that opportunity in the US because everybody claims to be a competitor and you have a lot of competition, right? So you have to kind of either fake it or lie a little bit about what you're doing, because of the fact that not anybody can be a competitor. But I'm telling you, in Canada, you tend to learn from that, right? And what I saw is that, hey, Americans, you guys have transactions. You don't have real relationships, right? And the relationships are the ones that let you fail. And that's what I saw. And again, it's just so much competition. There's so many people that claim to be doing what you do, even today. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Everybody claims to know somebody. Everybody claims to be the best at something. That's not true, right? And that's what I'm saying. For me, it had to be based on relationship. And I wanted my friends to tell me that this is good or bad, and they wanted to tell me what I could do to be better. And if I couldn't do it, then please, find somebody else. But anyway.
Okay.
That was it. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. And your childhood was not an easy one, but your childhood and the developmental years have played a significant role in not just who you are, but what you do, and a lot of the organizations that I referenced earlier that you're involved in. Share with us a little bit. So, by example, if I'm not mistaken, before you were 6 or 7, you had 3 different names. Now, my first thought when I heard that was 3 different surnames, but you had 3 different first names. That's kind of tough. Tell us about your childhood.
Yeah, I was born from a single mom, and I have a twin sister that we were born together. And our mom came from Hungary, and she was in Canada for probably the first year of her life in Canada. And she had an affair and got pregnant and had 2 babies. And they told us that she wanted to keep us, but she couldn't. And she put us up for adoption. So I was born Laszlo Chupor. And they put us into a orphanage. And the orphanage changed our names to Barney and Betty, And so I was Barney. And then my dad came along and was looking for a son, and already had 3 daughters, and fell in love with me. And luckily, he didn't separate my sister and I. And so he adopted me, and I became Peter. So that was it. And I still remember the moment when I looked at my I guess my adopted mom, and I remember asking her. I said, "Are you our mom?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Did we come from your belly?" And she said, "Yes, you did." And she was weeping when she said that. And I remember looking at my sister, and I remember saying to her, and we're about 3 years old at the time, and said, "We're home." I knew I was home. I knew there was safety in this. My mom that I'm talking about had cancer, and she died when we were 6 years old. So my dad went into kind of a state of depression. And he was an executive in the oil and gas industry. And literally, he didn't really, I don't think he really wanted another children and another child. We were 10 years younger than his youngest child. And so for the first time, he had to sit back and say, his love of his life was not there. She's passed. And we went from, having him, get maids and anybody that would look after us to handing us home to different homes to look after us because he couldn't support us. He could support us financially, but not emotionally. And it was a big time. And I heard about it later that, he literally had a nervous breakdown. And so there was no base. My dad ended up remarrying to a woman that was just horrible. And she was, we called her our step monster, and she was just horrible. And, we had conversations about this in the past, Bill, when you couldn't even go to the bathroom at night because you're doing something bad and you're going to get beaten for it. And I started to realize if I did something, I could get beaten. I could handle it a little bit differently than my sister could. And so we literally had to create a whole life in regards to how to get up and go to the bathroom. And it was just crazy. And if there was going to be any sound and it woke her up and she was going to get angry and she was going to get mad at me, my sister would run back to the room. So this is crazy. But, I started to realize what friends look like and who people are. They're safe. You can hear people's game that they're playing with people in life. And it became really important for me at a very young age that the people around me, I was always going to look at the people that I thought were the safest, the ones who I really believed could be friends. And I was always going to hold on to them and try to figure out at some point in time, no matter where I went, they would always be something important to me. And I did. And it became very important for me. By the way, within Friends of Peter now, I have a gentleman by the name of Dr. Easton Wren. And Easton, when I was 11 years old, was my soccer coach.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about what I was doing at that time, but he knew that my family wasn't doing well. And he knew that I didn't have a great life. And at one point, he actually and his wife sat down and said, "We're thinking about adopting Peter." He didn't want to bring my sister in. He just wanted me. And then he realized that's not going to be good, and that would probably really hurt my dad. So he didn't. But you know what? I had this conversation when I was 20 something in the U.S. where he and I had dinner together. And I was just honoring him as a significant guy. He was former chief geophysicist of Amoco Petroleum, one of the top oil and gas guys in the world. I always knew him on the business side as being somebody very significant. But we're having dinner, and he says to me, Peter, he said, when you were young, he said, I really liked you. He said, there was something special about you. And my wife and I had a conversation about, would we adopt you? I said, what? And I remember getting tears in my eyes and said, are you serious? You had that level of connection? Even to the point that you'd want, and he said, yeah, I did. Today, he's part of Friends of Peter. He never misses a Friends of Peter. And I love the fact that like a dad, I can let people know who the significance of this man is to me. And he's one of the most amazing relationships. I mean, obviously, it's been, a 50-year relationship, he's incredible, but that's what life does for you, right? So, yeah.
It shows the power of having someone in your life that genuinely cares. Someone in your life that understands the power of and the need for relationship, both receiving and giving. I'm going to jump to a different topic just real quickly, but I do want to come back. Friends of Peter is something that I think it would be easier for some people to think of, what a self-centered guy that is to start something called Friends of Peter.
Sure.
But I think the story is you didn't start calling it Friends of Peter. I think it started, expand on this. I think one of your friends said that she kept writing down a notation of FOP. And is that right? Share that.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. And there were two ladies out of Houston, very significant business people, and they were creating a business, and I was trying to help them. And every time I gave them a name of somebody to call, she would put in there into her phone. She put in the name, and then she put beside it FOP. And I was sitting with her one day, and a friend calls, and she shows me the phone. She goes, "Look, who's calling?" I said, "Oh man, tell him I love him." And she said, but beside his name was FOP. And I asked her, so what is FOP? She said, it means Friends of Peter. I said, what? And she said, whenever you give me a name, I put FOP beside it, because when that pops up, I drop everything to have that conversation, because I knew how significant they are to me and how they are to you. And I was blown away by that. And that's actually what created the Friends of Peter story in regards to, why that was something. When I was sitting with my friends and we were talking about having a group where we could just talk about life and be real with each other, they said, we should just call it Friends of Peter. And I said, why? And they said, because, that's what you represent, but it's true. Whenever somebody calls, they have to say, I love you. Peter says he loves you, right? It's just a realness in regards to the significance of what we're trying to represent.
Yeah, let me expand on that. When I get a call from someone, they say, I'm so-and-so, you don't know me, but I have to tell you that Peter loves you. And that's a signature. that is like the secret handshake, if you will, of anyone who is a friend of Peter. And Peter, I love the fact that you are so literally driven by love. You mentioned earlier that if we were together and you were to hug me, we've been together and you've hugged me. And without any concern other than to show that you care and you matter. And I tell you what, I hugged you right back, and I actually had to be careful because at the time you had a little bit of a dicey ticker there, I think, and I didn't want to squeeze you too hard. But health-wise, you're doing well?
I'm doing extremely well. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Yeah.
Good. Back to your childhood, and I don't want to make this into anything too extensive, but it's very interesting to me the different lot in life that twins ended up between you and your sister. I know you love her, but you've kind of fallen into a different path. Talk about that if you're comfortable, and give me how you think that might have happened.
It's just, when I speak, it's interesting. I always talk about the fact that when you're born at the same moment, and yet you see how life takes you after that, and realizing that there was something in me that I became more of a caretaker to her. Right. I taught her to do her shoes. I taught her to, whenever we moved someplace, I'd have her write down our address, and I'd give that to her. I mean, it literally is, it's a person I loved. Right. And, but as I started to grow up and I had opportunities in school, I accelerated ahead of her, even though we're twins. I was 2 years ahead of her. And now I'm dealing with people older than me, even though I'm still supposed to be this, kind of with my sister the same age, and realizing that I was already moving and developing a path in life where my sister was still waiting for Peter. And my sister had a health issue where she had to wear braces on her legs, which everybody would make fun of her. I never saw the fun, but I guess by herself, again, so we're separating, then people would treat her a little bit differently. And I remember the day that I'm sitting in class, and I was grade 2, and our mother had passed, and a kid behind me was kind of joking about the fact my mom had passed, and I turned around and punched him in the nose. The next thing I'm on the way to the principal's office, and I'm crying, and I know I'm going to get the strap, which is what's happening at that time. And the teacher was telling me, you can't punch kids in the face. And I got to the principal's office, and he looked at me and he sat me down. He said, Peter, so what's going on here? I said, this guy behind me made a joke about my sister, and then he made a joke about my mother that just passed. And I just punched him in the nose. And he said, you know what? That was the right thing to do. And they brought that guy in, right? And I realized, wow, this is kind of interesting. But what was happening at the time, my sister, whenever she fell down, she would never let anybody pick her up. She'd literally stop everything and scream and yelling, I want Peter, Peter, Peter. So they'd get me out of class, and I'd have to go pick her up. And I'll tell you, you look back at life, and just even today, I've been in so many moments where I've been sitting with somebody, and I see that level of connection with somebody in that room. And there's an example. I was sitting at a business meeting in Colorado Springs, a very significant nonprofit. They were asking me to meet, and the woman was really freaked out that I was coming in to meet her. because they'd always heard that when you mention a name, Peter's going to call him, and Peter can validate and invalidate things on the spot, and don't claim that you know somebody because he'll validate that, right? And this woman was standing there and she was talking and she started to share, and all of a sudden she just broke down. She started to cry. And she says, I know I can't do this. I know I'm not good enough. I know I'm not. And I'm looking at her like, are you okay? And there's a chairman of her board was sitting right beside her, and he literally reaches out and grabs her hand. And when he says, and she said, I know I can't do this. I know I'm not good enough. And he says, you know what? We know you're not, but that's why we're here for you. I got your back. Whoa, I got your back. And I'll never, that's a statement that's taken me through my entire life, that you need somebody that's going to have your back, that's there no matter what's happening, is still there. And it's usually somebody of some influence, right? In this case, it was a principal, right? You know, I was there for my sister, right? And I realized my sister has lived a whole life where her focus was on me. I'm Peter's sister. Peter, you know, she'll tell the world about Peter, right? And I'm looking back and I look at her, and she's only had 2 jobs in her entire life. One was based on a business that I owned, that we had her work in, and she ended up leaving. And she worked at Walmart, and she got fired because she left her station because the equipment, a checkout register wouldn't work, and it was broken. She thought it was broken. It was just they had a network down or something. She decided, I'm letting people down, so she quit. Well, she can't go back to the company, right? But her whole focus has always been being supported, you know, and it's tough. And I realized we've had different lives. She had different relationships, and she's been through abusive relationships. You know, I'll tell you, there's one story, and I hope I'm not going off path by this, but there was a business I was involved in Vancouver, and my sister was reading about it. And I was involved with a guy that, you know, I went to school with. And it was a pretty successful guy at the time. And my sister calls me and she says, Peter, I want you to know this. And she said, I don't know how to say this, but that guy raped me when I was 11 or 15 years old. And I'm going, what? And I'm trying to look at, is my sister really stable? Was this really true? And then I started to realize, of course, you can't fool around with stuff like that. But I started to think about, are you serious? How do you go back into a relationship today and look at somebody in a business relationship and say, this is what I heard, and I trust my sister that you did something, right? And I remember I had to go to some of my friends and say, what would you do in this situation? You know, do you take it as truth? Is it just something that happened in the past? You know, and I had to come back and say, you know what, this is a business I don't want to be part of. I didn't say anything about what I heard. I just had to trust. And I went back to friends of mine. I was lucky. I was on a board with the former head of the DEA, and I was asking him about it. And he said, because as a police guy, he said, there'll be something in this guy's past that shows this is something he's done in the past. And he's probably done it to other people. So we'll see that. But it'll be in the future, right? We'll see something, but you can't necessarily claim it now. But all I made a decision is to just distance myself from that to protect my sister, right? But it's just crazy in the social world with all these people you don't really know, but have from your past, or when you think you're becoming somebody, everybody wants to connect with you, and everybody wants wanting help and money, and you know, it's crazy. You just don't know the people you're really around, and I realize that sometimes it hits you in a pretty significant way in this case. But I also understand what my sister's been through, and I wouldn't want that for anybody. You know?
Yeah, that's another tough road for your sister, and certainly a very challenging situation that you were in. So moving back into a business frame, which is, I don't want to discount the importance and the significance of what you just said and your sister's been through, because so many people in this world, and not just our country, but in this world, have been through things like that. And it comes out when it comes out. And so many victims are ridiculed and vilified. So that is truly a significant part of this world. So again, I don't want to just step away from it without acknowledging that. And God bless your sister, and I hope things can continue to improve for her. Moving into business, you talked a few moments ago, Peter, about the woman in the nonprofit and how she was told that you validate and verify everything, which he will do. Peter will, if you mention, I'll just throw out a name from the past. If you mention Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's, in a meeting, Peter's going to call, would have one back before he moved on, before he died, that kind of thing. And it's that instant, let's not fool around, that instant change concept that you've come up with. Explain to us that concept and your home plate approach and that whole instant change.
Sure. My base is that I don't want to leave them. And I go back and this, Bill, I mean, in 2010, I had over 1,500 meetings, when I look back at my year. And you start realizing that's a lot of meetings, right? And I was meeting people one-on-one, and I was meeting people that were significant, and people where somebody says, you need to know this person, or when you hear the person's name, you're like, are you serious? You really want to introduce me? You're introducing me to Steven Spielberg. I mean, it was that level of significance. But I started to look back and realizing that every one of those people, other than that big name and a title, or I guess some celebrity, what was make them different? And I was looking at a human level, and I started to realize I couldn't describe that. And I saw people were very similar based on that, right? And that was the one thing I started to understand, is that I know I'm meeting people that are significant. I'm there for a moment, and I had to be really good at listening to them. And I'm going to pick up the phone and call people that they said they wanted to know. The fact that Steven Spielberg wanted to know Dave Thomas, and they wouldn't pick up the phone and call each other, kind of blew me away. That's the significance of that stuff, right? So, but I really didn't want to leave a meeting with to-dos. And that's where I was sitting back and saying, if I can't get it done now, if I can't validate something now, if I can't help you with what the next step needs to be for you, then that's where I'm broken. That's why we call it instant change. I'm not going to sit back and have you call me next week, or you didn't call this person, or you promised me this. I didn't, because I didn't have enough time. I literally wanted to be done everything I could do in that moment. And that's where instant change came from. And then because of the fact that I had to listen, and I wanted to become the best listener, is why the home plate was created. Because I wanted to understand the values of who they were, of the project they're involved in, of the things they're creating. And one of those core values, because if I'm going to introduce you to somebody, I want them to be in line with those values. I don't want to bring somebody to the table that's going to hurt you. It's going to steal your idea. I don't want that, right? Everything had to be based on the value system in regards to the significance. And that's why the home plate was created, so that I could prove to people that I listened. And when I sat back and said to people, hey, by the way, here's the home plate. It doesn't make any sense. It's not baseball related, right? But this is something that I've created for me to tell you that I've heard what you've been doing. And I will sit back and say, so, well, you just told me, Bill, based on your podcast, your passion is people. You want to create the opportunity to create the best for people. You want people to be the best, their business to be the best. You're going to create a place where people, and your passion is about connecting great people to the world. And you want people to know about this great person, right? What makes them unique or beautiful, which is the next corner, is that story that we're talking about. It's the uniqueness of who Peter is, right? In the way that you see me, right? The things you're asking me aren't things I would ever be asked in a daily basis by anybody, even people that would be friends, because it's too sensitive. It's too real, right? Is it really relevant to the business? No, it may not be, right? It doesn't, but that's the uniqueness of who Peter is, right? And that's what you're doing. So I don't want them to think when I'm telling them that based on what I heard, this is your passion, this is what makes you unique. And if it's unique, it's beautiful. And the next thing is, what do you want to do to make a difference in this world? That's the impact. Are we talking about anything that's going to make an impact? Do you have the ability? Have you ever made an impact, right? Because that impact is truth. It has to be based in truth. And then the last thing, we're going to make something sustainable, and sustainable creates legacy, right? So that's what I'm about, is if I can't introduce you to somebody who's passionate about the same things you are, that sees the uniqueness of who you are as beautiful. And if you're not doing that to make a difference in this world, make an impact, then, and if we can't make that impact sustainable, we're not doing anything. And I realize if any corner of that home plate wasn't a check mark, it's not the right relationship. They might love your passion. They might believe in the fact you want to make a difference in this world. They might sit back, and with your background, Bill, I mean, everybody wants to be around you because of what you've done and the significance of who you are in the marketing world and at a corporate level. I mean, everybody wants to be around you, right? But you're sitting back and say that their uniqueness, and they see who you are, but that's not just who you are. I mean, and I'm so glad you're going down a different level with me, saying the uniqueness of who Peter is not anything to do with any business I've been involved in. Has nothing to do with any title that I ever had. It's the uniqueness of me as a human, in regards to the fact that I love life. I love my sister. I love making a difference in this world, right? That's why I want to make an impact, right? So it's all of those things just becomes the home plate. And again, if any corner of the home plate is a negative, it's not a relationship. It's the one you can walk away from.
So Peter, is there some place that listeners can go to take time with and visually see home plate and understand it? Is that somewhere out there, or is it in the beautiful mind of Peter Strople?
Well, it is. You know, I've been asked to do a book on it, and I haven't, and a lot of it's because of the fact that people have taken it, and you'll see online if you went to YouTube. You'll see if you typed in, home plate and Peter Strople's home plate, you'll see other people have taken it. You'll see Elliot Frick has done something with it in St. Louis. It's been really cool to see how people have taken it. I think any basis of any methodology that you create, where you're sitting back and you let people share, and then you stop that moment and say, "Listen, can I share what I've heard?" But put it into things that matter. Like, again, here's what I believe your passion is, right? If you can do that, you're going to just see people. Elliot told me the first time that I did the home plate with him, and he cried because he felt like somebody actually heard him. And he started to use that with his clients. And he saw, as a marketing guy, and he said, it's the first time one of his clients cried. And the guy said, "I can't believe," he said, "for the first time in all these years, I feel like somebody heard me." That's power. But again, that's what a good friend should be doing. And again, whether it's somebody's own methodology, if they want to use the home plate, it doesn't matter. I don't see the home plate. It was a unique thing for me, and I do believe if people do use it in the right way, but people can also use it in a way that hurts people, and I don't want that. So again, but we do have to be a lot better about listening these days. So.
Okay. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to take you at your word and Google Peter Strople and home plate, and I'm going to put a link from what I find in the show notes. So everyone listening, it is really something that's incredible and valuable and very hard to discuss, or to explain rather, in any kind of detail, just audibly, because it's got a visual aspect to it. Friends of Peter, relationship-driven business models, helping as many people as you can, sitting in a meeting saying, well, let's get this done now, and picking up the phone and calling whomever. That can seem to some that it would be superficial. Peter, how much depth is there to that, and how do the multitude of relationships that you have get depth and move beyond superficial?
Well, I think the fact that I never discounted when somebody says to me, "I want you to meet one of my friends." I take that as the highest level of dishonor, right? And when I know that I'm going to meet somebody's friend, I'm going to want my friend to look like a hero because of what I'm doing in that moment. When I saw years ago, when he made a decision, I was going to go off on my own. And a friend of mine asked, "What you want to do?" And I said, "I just want to help." I said, "I want to be an investor I want to be I want to be a good investor, and I want to help companies. And the only way I could do that is create relationships, because they want customers, they want investors, but those customers, I started realizing maybe the business isn't ready for that customer. So that's why I had to validate things, right? And that's where I started to realize the basis of what I want to be able to do is just to validate. Is this something real? If it's not, then what it could be, right? And that's where I'm sitting back and thinking about back to, when a friend of mine says, well, you sound like a consultant. I said, well, I don't want to be a consultant. And then a friend of mine jokingly said, you know what a consultant is? I said, no. And he said, it's a guy who knows 1,000 ways to make love to a woman, doesn't know any women. I said, oh, that's not good. I remember, how can you get that out of your brain in regards to how you describe that, right? I said, I don't want to be that. But then I also walked into businesses where we had McKinsey and all these consultants that had given these people this kind of overview of this is how broken you are, and this is what we would do to fix you, and then they give them all this kind of strategy, and then I'd ask them. So they said you're going to have to do this with IBM. Who do they tell you to call at IBM? They said, well, they didn't give us any name at IBM. I said, really? So they just told you what you need to do, but you don't know anybody at IBM? No. I said, oh, obviously that's how they're going to make their money. Is that what they're going to? And I realized that people aren't making those calls, and a lot of them because they didn't even know that person. They didn't know the right person at IBM. That's when I realized, so hold it. So if I'm sitting down with you and I know IBM is a potential partner or could be, then why wouldn't I introduce you to the person that I know right on the spot and validate? Is this something you guys would even look at? Does this make any sense? Or is this a waste of your time, Mr. IBM, right? That's what I wanted to do. And that's when I realized there was more power in that. And then I sit back and people would say, well, I know somebody at IBM. Really? Who do you know? And they mention a name. I said, well, that's my friend. So let's get him on the phone right now. Oh, they'll be so excited. We're sitting together. Whoa. Maybe I don't really know him that well, right? That's what I started to realize. This is all falling apart. And I realized if I can give you a phone number, and now it's your phone number, it's in and you can call them anytime you want. And just the next level is, again, because of some of my health issues, I realized that I wasn't going to be on that phone call potentially. That's where I said, do me a favor. By the way, when you do call them, tell them I love them, right? And that I didn't realize the impact that would have in regards to, they called me back and took me for dinner. I mean, I didn't realize any of that, of the significance of the relationship that I'd created. But when I did say, when you call them, I realized I trust you. I'm giving you this phone number. This is your relationship now. Rather than trying to validate, am I good enough for this? And how much money am I going to make from that conversation? It's ridiculous. That's not what the world should be based on. And that's where, again, not only friends of Peter, but this whole idea. I love it when people say to me, Peter, I did a Peter today. I picked up the phone and I called somebody out of the blue, and they took my call and said, hey, how are you? And I realized I haven't talked to them in a year or 2 years. And I introduced them to somebody, and we did so much in that moment in regards to significance of moving something forward or invalidating something, so we didn't have to waste time on it. Yeah. I love this. I love this stuff.
So when it comes to Peter Strople and friends of Peter, depth of relations doesn't necessarily mean that you guys or gals, that you're friends and you get together on a daily, weekly, monthly basis and do social things and all of that. But so my take on it is that the depth of relationship is the genuine, authentic interest in helping people accomplish whatever it is they're attempting to accomplish, if you have the ability to do that. I've gotten phone calls from people, and I mentioned this earlier in our episode, where they said, I'm so-and-so, and Peter had me call you. And by the way, Peter says he loves you. That creates a depth that very few other business type calls do. I've also gotten a lot of calls that say, Joe Blow or Sally Joe has called, and they wanted me to call you, and it's been meaningless. Let me move on just a bit, because I know time's getting short. I don't want to keep you nor our listeners too long, but I do want to kind of move back and end in an area that I know you find not just rewarding, but essential to your life. And that's the area of, I'm going to use the term legacy, where you and again, the beautiful Kelly are so committed to helping others. I know that you have an interest in helping foster families, foster children, children that have been adopted, helping people who have been adopted understand that that's not a negative and it's not a black mark. It's part of life. I know that you are very active in trying to help released prisoners kind of re-engage in a positive way into the community. If I'm not mistaken, you've even had people come live in your house for a period of time till they can get on their feet. Talk to us about that overall drive that you have and Kelly has to help people however you can.
Oh, I look at my life, right? I mean, I was born an underdog, right? And you're either going to create the relationships or you're going to have somebody come alongside that, that believes that this person could be something special. I've been very lucky in my life to have very significant people look at me and say, there's something about this kid, that he matters, and we all need somebody to come and be a friend, right? And I just, like I said, when I first got involved with the Kairos prison ministry and realized I was meeting people, you're in maximum security prisons, right? And I'm meeting somebody, and I'm listening to them tell me about, why did you go to jail? I mean, how old were you, and and it kind of blew me away that some of these guys were doing things that I did when I was a child. I mean, are you serious? You went to jail for that stuff? Oh, the fact your dad was a bad guy and your grandfather and your uncle was a bad guy. Are you being kind of seen as the same level of badness? And I started to realize that whether it's prison related or on the foster care side, that we're all starting with the base of who are our relationships and who are we? Are we even significant to life? And most people know that if kids go through foster care and if they're not adopted, if they don't have some base of support and significance in regards to who they are and helping them, by the time they're 18, they're going to be going to jail. I mean, they're going to be let go to the community, and they're going to do things that they're going to put them in jail. So I saw there was no difference in what I was seeing in prison versus what I was seeing in homes. And I saw the same thing. There was a gentleman that I'd met named Guadalupe, and he was let out of prison 8 years early because he was dying of cancer. And I remember asking him, I said, so tell me what happened. He said, well, my dad and I used to collect, bottles and cans when we were 10 years old. And we'd always save up money for a present at Christmas time for my mom. And he said, so this 10 years old, they'd been getting bottles and cans and selling them to create the base of money. And they bought their mother a gift. And the mother came in the room and she saw this gift. And she opened it and she looked at it and she said, it's a nightie. It's another nightie. And she throws it at her husband. And she runs out the door and jumps into the car of her boyfriend and runs down the street. And this guy, Guadalupe, said to me, my dad committed suicide that day. And this is Christmas. I'm going, what? And I said, so who was with you? What was your base after that? He said, we didn't have any aunts, uncles. He said, it really became the gangs. The gangs are the people that really supported me. And that's what brought him to jail, And knowing that when he was leaving, now he's dying, all he wanted to know is he wanted to have a relationship with his kids. So I just want my kids to know I'm better than this, right? And that's what I started realizing. Everything comes down to family breakdown, whether it's going to prison or whether it's just a system where you've been given up and now a parent has to look after you. My mother that birthed us must have been an amazing woman. I believe that there was amazing love that we had in that first year of our lives. Because even after later on, when we didn't have the greatest around us, I knew my body experienced love. I knew what it meant when somebody walked into love that claimed to be love. and I knew at the deepest levels, that's who I was. And that's what I look at today. If you experience in a moment and somebody looks at you and says, hey, listen, you're something special, I'm willing to give you a phone number. There's something about you that in this relationship, this person that referred me to you is somebody I really believe in. And you're really lucky to have that person in your life. I'm going to be the best I can be for them. That's what I love. And I still, Roy Croft's quote in regards to, I love you not for who you are, but for who I am when I'm with you, is still, for me, the base of what a true relationship should be, right? If we can't look at ourselves and be better for the people that we're sitting with, then what are we doing there? What are we really doing there, right? And like I said, at the end of the day, legacy is a real big deal for me. And that, I created a legacy quote. Legacy is not, leaving something for somebody. It's leaving something in somebody. That's the most important thing, right? And that's what I think, Bill. We all do that, Bill. You represent that. If you called me at a moment's notice, I'll take your call. I'll do whatever I can for you, there's no question. It's not about money. Isn't anything. It's literally 100% based on the fact that I'm doing this because I love Bill and I want to make this a better world. And if I can help you in the relationships you've got, validate or invalidate, is this something you want to be focused on? And is this something really going to change the world? Then why wouldn't I help you? Yeah, I would, so.
Well, Peter Strople, thank you for being here. And we've covered a lot of ground and we've talked about a whole lot of subjects. And to end our conversation, let me ask you the question that I no doubt know is coming, and you put everything together, and how would you answer the question, what's the point?
It's the only point. It's love. If I can't do something in a moment, if I can't look into somebody's eyes, if I can't be that base of real relationship, then there's no point. It's just fake, And like I said, if I knew the next moment from here that I'd be gone, the only thing I could ever say to you, Bill, I love you, man. And I want you to know wherever you go, if you said Peter loves you, and you go to one of my friends, they're going to treat you with respect because that's what you deserve, and that's what I would do for you.
So the point is love. It gets down to being that simple. That's amazing. Peter Strople, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do for so many people, what you've done for me personally. I appreciate that, not the least of which is being my guest on today's show. Those of you that are here because you love Peter and Peter loves you, thank you for being here. My regular listeners, thank you. If it is your first time, enjoy the talk with Peter, but check out some other episodes. There's some pretty amazing people with a whole diverse background. And here's what they all have in common. They all have found their purpose in life and they're living it to the best of their ability. And our conversations are intended to help you do the same. So check it out. Peter, thank you. I love you. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Love you, Bill.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.